for questions.
God bless you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Veronica Chambers, and I am the editor of narrative projects at the New York Times. This event was recorded in early April. In light of the timing of the stream, we know that many people watching tonight will be thinking about the many Black and brown lives lost and the events that continue to reawaken the fight for racial justice. We are too.
Hello, my name is Nikki Giovanni. In 2020, the United States finally began to discuss a little bit of what so many of us live every day, from the time the sun rises until well after it sets. 2020 was called an unprecedented time for this reason. It occurs to me that this moment is calling in more bravery, more honesty, more moral courage. We must say things in difficult ways. May we continue to push for what seems impossible. And in that way, may 2021 be unprecedented for the sense of growing understanding, empathy, and respect. We're going to Mars. We're going to Mars for the same reason Marco Polo rocketed to China, for the same reason Columbus trimmed his sails on a dream of spices, for the very same reason Shackleton was enchanted with penguins, for the reason we fall in love. It's the only adventure. We're going to Mars because Perry couldn't go to the North Pole without Matthew Henson, because Chicago couldn't be a city without Jean-Baptiste de Sable, because George Washington Carver and his peanut were the right partners for Booker T. It's a life-seeking thing. We're going to Mars because whatever is wrong with us will not get right with us. So we journey forth carrying the same baggage, but every now and then leaving one little bitty thing behind. Maybe drop torturing hunchbacks here, maybe drop lynching Billy Budd there, maybe not whipping Uncle Tom to death, maybe resisting global war, one day looking for prejudice to slip, one day looking for hatred to tumble by the wayside. One day maybe the whole community will no longer be vested in who sleeps with whom. Maybe one day the Jewish community will be at rest, the Christian community will be content, the Muslim community will be at peace, and all the rest of us will get great meals at holy days and learn new songs and sing in harmony. We're going to Mars because it gives us a reason to change. If Mars came here, it would be ugly. Nations would band together to hunt down and kill Martians. And being the stupid, undeserving life forms that we are, we would also hunt down and kill what would be termed Martian sympathizers, as if the fugitive slave law wasn't bad enough then, as if the so-called war on terrorism isn't pitiful now. When do we learn? And what does it take to teach us? Things cannot be what we want, when we want, as we want. Other people have ideas and inputs, and why won't they leave Rap Brown alone? The future is ours to take. We're going to Mars because we have the hardware to do it. We have rockets and fuel and money and stuff. And the only reason NASA is holding back is they don't know if what they send out will be what they get back. So let me slow this down. Mars is 1 year of travel to get there, plus 1 year of living on Mars, plus 1 year to return to Earth, equals 3 years of Earthlings, being in a tight space, going to an unknown place with an unsure welcome awaiting them. Tired muscles, unknown and unusual foods, harsh conditions, and no known landmarks to keep them human. Only a hope and a prayer that they will be shadowed beneath a benign hand. And there is no historical precedent for that except this. The trip to Mars can only be understood through Black Americans, I say. The trip to Mars can only be understood through Black Americans. The people who were captured and enslaved immediately recognized the men who chained and whipped them and herded them into ships so tightly packed there was no room to turn, no privacy to respect, no tears to fall without landing on another. We're not kind and gentle and concerned for the states of their souls, no. The men with whips and chains were understood to be killers, feared to be cannibals, known to be sexual predators. The captured knew they were in trouble, in an unknown place without communicable abilities, but with a violent and capricious species. But they could look out and still see signs of home. They could still smell the sweetness in the air. They could see the clouds floating above the land they loved. But there reached a point where the captured could not only not look back, they had no idea which way back might be. There was nothing in the middle of the deep blue water to indicate which way home might be. And it was that moment when a decision had to be made. Do they continue forward with a resolve to see this thing through, or do they embrace the waters and find another world? In the belly of the ship, a moan was heard, and someone picked up that moan, and a song was raised, and that song would offer comfort and hope and tell the story. When we go to Mars, it's the same thing. It's middle passage. When the rocket red glares, the astronauts will be able to see themselves pull away from Earth. As the ship goes deeper, they will see a sparkle of blue. And then one day, not only will they not see Earth, they won't know which way to look. And that is why NASA needs to call Black America. They need to ask us, how did you calm your fears? How were you able to decide you were human, even when everything said you were not? How did you find the comfort in the face of the improbable to make the world you came to your world? How was your soul able to look back and wonder? And we will tell them what to do. To successfully go to Mars and back, you will need a song. Take some Billie Holiday for the sad days and some Charlie Parker for the happy ones, but always keep at least one good spiritual for comfort. You will need a slice or two of meatloaf, and if you can manage it, some fried chicken in a shoebox with a nice, moist lemon pound cake. A bottle of beer, because no one should go that far without a beer, and maybe a six-pack, so if there is life on Mars, you can share. Popcorn for the celebration when you land, while you wait on your land legs to kick in. And as you climb down the ladder from your spaceship to the Martian surface, look to your left, and there you'll see a smiling community quilting a black-eyed pea, watching you descend.
Tonight's event is the launch event for a new narrative project series that the New York Times is doing called Black History Continued. Black History Continued takes a deeper look at transformative individuals and powerful moments in Black history that shaped the culture and in some way changed the world. I'm here with director Peter Ramsey, novelist N.K. Jemisin, and singer Estelle. Each artist brings their own perspective to the superhero trope, creating and embodying characters of color with exceptional powers, abilities, and world-saving duties. In Japanese, there's a word called daifan that means you're a super fan. When I lived in Tokyo, there were lots of super fans of hip-hop who knew more about the music than I ever did. I feel like working on historical projects at the Times for the last 3 years, I've become a super fan of Black history because one common theme you see in the stories, be it in science and literature, music or sports, agriculture, or the natural world, Black history is full of stories that display a relentless imagination and boundless creativity. So my first question is there a figure or a moment in Black history that you find particularly inspiring and why? And maybe we can start with Nora.
I mean, it's difficult to narrow down a single figure because there's so many that are inspirational in one way or another. I talk a lot about the fact that with my novel, with the fifth season in the Broken Earth books, I was inspired by the story of Margaret Garner, who was a slave, an enslaved person who ran away with her children. And when something went wrong, slave catchers were about to catch up. She chose to kill her children rather than let them go back into slavery. And this is a thing that, I don't find it inspiring as in I want to emulate, but as in, I can empathize with that kind of determination to be free and that kind of love that says, it's important to make sure that your loved ones' lives are good and not just alive.
Estelle, is there a moment or a figure in Black history that really speaks to you?
Rita Marley. I read her book, Catch a Fire, and it's, we don't really know the story of Bob Marley because he's not here to tell it. But I read her book and just listening to her chronicle their life together, and then just watching her and seeing her children and seeing how much she had to play in the legacy, how much she stood for the legacy, how much she protected the legacy, all while not getting any of the fanfare. To me, she was the backbone of the legacy that we all celebrate right now. And to me, that's kind of like an inspiration in the back of my brain. Like you said, it's one thing to just live. You want to have a good life. And she's ensured that so much of her legacy and his legacy stands so strong. It's beautiful to see that and know and look at this beautiful Black woman as the matriarch of all of that. Yeah.
Peter.
And I think when I think of people that inspire me, I do think of people who see beyond the immediate, illusion of the moment, which is, basically what American society is when it comes to race. It's all this weird fictitious illusion that everybody's forced to buy into to one degree or another. And in that sense, somebody who really inspires me, I don't know, maybe more than almost anyone else, is James Baldwin. Just his writing, his worldview, his ability to sort of just get to the core of things without buying into the false premise that there's any difference between anyone and anyone else. To me, that's just a beautiful, powerful thing. So I'm constantly inspired by him.
I aspire to get better at verbal words versus just written words because, he shows how it's done.
Do you feel like anger is a hard thing to work with as a Black artist, like personally, or in how you worry that maybe you might come across when you make certain demands or when you insist on certain things? Do you feel comfortable with anger or frustration?
It's like fire, you can use it to, if you use it to heat something up and that works, great. You can cook something, you can get warm, you can make something into another shape. But if you let it get out of control or let it go someplace you don't want, then you're in trouble. For so many reasons. I mean, I am a Black male in America, so outbursts of anger for me can, they can have repercussions career-wise or just breathing wise. So, I kind of, that's never too far from your thinking, which is a shame. But, just as a human being, anger is something, you get to a certain point in life and you realize that acting out on it immediately is not always the wisest course. So use it for what it can be used for.
Yeah, one of the One of the most useful things that I was ever able to do was just kind of recognize that um, despite the fact that anger, particularly Black women's anger, is sort of vilified and stigmatized in our society, just recognizing how healthy anger actually is. Anger is like pain. Pain lets you know that something's wrong. You need to do something about it. Pain's not bad in itself. Anger lets you know that something is unjust in your life. And you need to acknowledge that injustice exists. If you try and suppress the anger, that doesn't change the injustice. You might as well acknowledge the anger and realize where the injustice lies and try to fix that. There's a thing in our society that tries to pretend that anger isn't real, but that's because that thing in our society is defending the existence of injustice, and we need to reject that.
Can you talk a little bit about the medium or genre in which you work? And I know all of you work in different mediums, but just about what you're working in now and what you find exciting about it in this moment. Peter, do you want to start?
In my career, I've kind of hopped back and forth between live action filmmaking and animation. And right now, I'm at this moment, I'm in a place where I'm working on something that combines both. My orientation, I was always, I want to do live action movies. I want to be Coppola. I want to be, Scorsese. I want to be Kurosawa. And I kind of fell into animation. It was kind of a fluke, but once there, just realizing the potential of it and the untapped potential of it, and how I think the big thing with animation is how expressive it can be as a medium. It's not necessarily even that you can do anything you want, but the properties of it allow you to express things in a way that I think is can be more direct, can be more powerful, can be and just as sophisticated as the most sophisticated live action film. So to be working in that medium at a time when so many people are starting to kind of embrace it for what it can do is really exciting.
We have to say that you made Oscar history by winning the Academy Award for Spider-Verse. And can you just say something about that moment and what it felt like? Because now you are part of Black history. I mean, all of you are. Our MacArthur genius, Nora and Estelle, your Grammys and everything else. But what does it mean to walk into that history in animation as a director?
It means a ton. I mean, for me, mostly the thought of other people being, inspired by it is probably the biggest thing for me. To be the first Black person to be nominated and win in that category, for me, it really is about what that means to other people who are aspiring to do this and, maybe didn't know that Black people did this or didn't know it was possible. It's like me when I was growing up. I never saw that. I didn't know Black people made movies. I didn't know Black people had anything to do with cartoons. So the degree to which, that barrier is knocked down is the best, and for me, the true worth of that happening. That's the best thing.
Well, it's inspiring to all of us. And Estelle, I know that your character in Steven Universe was created after you. I mean, what is it like to have an animated character that was inspired by your voice and your movements? And
oh my goodness, you dream things up as a musician. It's our freedom. We get the chance to dream things up and make music and hope no one thinks we're nuts, right? And likes it. And I didn't know what it would become. I just knew that now my little nieces and nephews could hear my voice. And as you said before, there was Cree Summer. There was Cree Summer in the voiceover space for me that I knew, that I could say, oh, black woman, okay. And we barely knew more than we knew she had 11 roles.
She's in every channel. Yeah.
She's like the only one at the point
been in everything
of
for
my
years.
entry. Thank you, Cree. Let's keep it. Let's wedge that door open some more, And just even, I'm honored, and then as the character trajectory turned and it moved, and I found myself becoming, more of a symbol of my character, I should say, becoming more of a symbol of more of a point of seeing a vision for young LGBTQIA youth, it made me even happier. You know, I've been doing Pride shows, and it was just seeing them, seeing their energy and seeing faces of humans just seeing themselves for once. You know, even if it's through a character, I was like, I'm doing the work. Thank you for using me, God, you know? And I'm just grateful to be here.
Nora, you want to talk about the mediums that you work in? And I mean, I know that obviously, you're most known as a novelist, but you've also done comic books. And do you want to talk about the genre and what's inspiring you now?
All artists draw on kind of a similar wellspring, and that wellspring takes a lot of forms. You know, most of us are sort of multi artists in some way or another. You know, pulled towards different media. Different media will resonate with us. Like, I grew up on animation that was not aimed primarily at kids, you know, anime and things like that. And so it's wonderful to see that really kind of catching hold in the US now, where we're seeing a lot more animation that kind of isn't strictly aimed at kids and things like that. Or even with things like Steven Universe, where the animation is aimed at kids, it's trying to be inclusive and is aimed at all the kids as opposed to like just some of them. You know, but for me, writing the comic book, writing Far Sector for DC, which is a Green Lantern spinoff, with a protagonist who is probably really blatantly based on Janelle Monáe, because I also fangirl her. But, you know, I mean, it just felt like the right thing to do. I wasn't actually super interested initially in writing a superhero comic book.
So I wanted to ask you all, how did you learn to dream, and what fuels your dreams as you go forward now? Nora, do you want to start?
Nerdiness. All of the nerd power that I accumulated during my childhood is now bursting forth. You know, I grew up on Star Wars and Star Trek and all kinds of other things. You know, I remember as a child, Dad and I would stay up till dark 30 watching old school Star Trek and old school Twilight Zone. Ideas and concepts, and, you know, of course reading science fiction novels, but also you know, watching things, engaging with comic books and things like that, and all of it just kind of jumbles together and reached a critical mass, and eventually kind of came out as me writing science fiction from perspectives that I felt needed to be written about.
Peter, how about you? How did you learn how to dream, and what fuels your dreams now?
My mom, she insisted on having a lot of books in the house. You know, neither her or my father were educated people. I think my mom had graduated high school, and that was it before she, you know, came out to LA from New Orleans. And my dad didn't even graduate high school. I found out later. He had like left. His family was so poor. He lied about his age to get into the army and went off to Korea. So it was that paradox of neither one of them had any experience with higher education, but the idea of it and the idea of being educated, they were totally into. So my mom had a lot of books around the house. We had a set of World Book encyclopedias, and I discovered those things, and I would get lost in them. I would just, you know, I got to the D's and started reading about dinosaurs, and man, I was like, I was going to be a paleontologist. That was my whole world. I was dead off into it. And I think between that and the music my dad listened to, because my dad came out to LA with the ambition of studying music. He ultimately couldn't because he didn't have a high school diploma, had to go to night school. And then he had, you know, suddenly he had a family. But he was big into jazz and classical music. So there was this breadth of music that we'd hear in the house that just kind of like, I really think it like opened my mind up to all these different sorts of feelings and textures, and it just seemed like there were a lot between those and the books we had. It felt like there were a lot of worlds beyond the world that I knew that I wanted to know what's going on out there, you know, and a lot of things that would feelings that would resonate about these other places and also other times that it's like there's no way I could know anything about those places, and yet they seem to be right. They seem to have some kind of meaning to me, even though I didn't know what that was. So that for me just kind of like, I think it made dreaming just a regular everyday part of life. And I think ever since then it's just been part of the water that I swim in, really.
So there was a cupboard in our house, in my grand's house growing up, and there was a bunch of coins, and these coins were like from all over the world, and they were old English coins in there too, like so the original halfpennies and all of that stuff. And I'm the 80s kid, 1980 I was born, and so I'm looking at this
Mm.
coin jar, and it's like Queen Victoria coins in there, and then coins from Zambia and coins from all over the world. My mom was like, "Yeah, that belonged to your great grandma." But my family was like this. They kept all of our history in specific places. So there was always a spirit of like, what did she do? What did she get into? Like, who was she? And so it just self the explorer thing in my soul.
There was a point when I realized that there was also an attempt to exclude us from these places where we belonged. Like I would watch Star Trek and see there was only one black person on the ship in the future, who was a regular staff member. I would hear these family stories of all of the wild and amazing things that my immediate ancestors did, but then I would watch TV or I would read books, novels, and things like that, and I would not see that reflected in them. And so that also, my like it kind of felt for a while like society was trying to tell me that your dreams should all be of the past. You should not be dreaming of the future. And that was one of the things that encouraged me to kind of do the stuff I do, is because we have futures too.
I've thought about that a lot, and as I got older, being a kid, as I got older, I started seeing the reality of like, how the world worked, in terms of black people and exclusion and things like that. But for whatever reason, it never took hold in my head that like, yeah, there are these forces pushing against you, but so that means you shouldn't, you should, and at home, my mom and dad, something in the news would come up or something in daily life, and they'd be, oh, see how they do, they're not going to let the little man get any place, they're not going to let the black man get any place, and that was, it was like part of my daily life, but for whatever reason, it was just like little bullets that like, ping, 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 ping.
So I just would love to ask you each to talk about the music that keeps you going, the thing that keep you inspiring. And I want to give a shout out to Estelle before I ask you to start. If you just put Estelle playlists in Apple Music, they're so good.
Yeah.
Living room dance party, cuffing season, love on love,
All of it.
all of it. And I just need you to keep making them. So if you could just promise
I
us
got you.
that you'll just
I got
keep
you.
throwing the playlist.
Oh, life. So over the past couple of years, it's been a doozy for us all, and I think it started a few
Mm.
years before the pandemic, the Panamania, the Panacotta, the Panorama.
The
It,
panini.
it was a few, yeah, the Panini. I don't know. It's been such a time, but a few years before that, I think it was kind of like just I started to like go inward a lot. So I mentioned praying and whatnot before, and I got even further with it, and I started to really kind of center myself. And I have my routines every morning that I do. Like I pray and meditate, and it doesn't have to be the longest. I just do it for 10 minutes, 25, and it kind of dictates the day for me.
Peter, do you want to talk about how music informed your work in animation, in live action? How do you work with music?
It's something that I think I access a lot in my head when I'm thinking about moments, moments in a story or a film or whatever it is, just a vibe that you get, a feeling that you get. A lot of times when I'm thinking from, moments in a story or in a narrative, there's some kind of music that is gonna be an analog to that feeling, that because music can be so specific, and it can take you places it can make you feel like you're having a memory of something that you never experienced, which is the fantastic thing about it. So for me, to the extent that I do use it, in my work. I think that's really what it is. Something that helps me connect more to the emotional quality of whatever moment that that I'm working on trying to create or trying to isolate down. And these things. You guys know how it is. This music just things just get inside you, and it's speaking to something to you. You can't even put your finger on it, but it's doing something. So I just kind of these days I try not to analyze it too much. I kind of like let it sit and do what it does and move on, and then maybe at some point I'll understand what it was trying to say to me. But that's pretty much my relationship with music these days.
That's cool. Nora, do you want to take us out? How does music work with your writing? Do you listen? I know. Do you listen to music as you write or when you're editing? Like, how does music come into the process?
I do listen to music while I work, but Estelle, your playlists are too good. I can't listen to them while I work because then I listen to the playlist and I'm not getting any work done. So yeah, I go with playlists that are more instrumental and more thematic. Like I build my own little playlists. Like I have an apocalypse mix that I listen to when I'm writing fight scenes. Yeah, I mean, and I mean, it's a lot of video game soundtrack music, and like I'm all over the place in terms of my boss battle music. But it's I'm all over the place in terms of my tastes. But I listen to things that fit what I'm writing in that moment. And there's so many good things out there. It's just a matter of kind of like boiling it down into things that will not interfere with my actual writing process.
Thank you, Peter Ramsey, N.K. Jemisin, and Estelle for your insights and generosity. To the audience at home, stay with us. Visit the event page to learn more about the series and upcoming events. And coming up, we have more artwork by the talented Reyna Noriega. And next, you will meet the young people who are powerfully transforming their real-life communities.
Hello, my name is John Eligon, and I'm a national correspondent covering race for the New York Times. I'm joined by 3 activists and students who are working within their communities to create change. There's Thandiwe, Abdullah, Brandon Dasent, and Ashanti Scott. They have founded organizations and have mobilized their peers. We'll hear more about their motivations and the work that came out of it. So I'd like to welcome the 3 of you and thank you all for joining us. The first thing I want to ask all 3 of you, what were some of the major forces from your childhood that set you all on the trajectories that you are on now? Ashanti, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things from my childhood that set the stage for my future activism and my future work was growing up around my mom, who worked for Jobs with Justice, Kentucky Jobs with Justice, which was labor work, and advocated for workers' rights and advocated for racial justice. So being alongside her in those spaces set the tone for my future work and really inspired me to be able to speak out for others and show up in my community.
Gotcha. Thandiwe?
I think growing up in a community that was filled with organizers, retired Panthers, just seeing my folks like organize and also seeing my people suffer. I live in a community where there's a lot of homelessness. I live in a community that is very over-policed. And my mom is also an organizer as well. And, she taught me to view the world in this way and to not only see what was going on around me, but also to do the work.
Gotcha. And Brandon, what about you? What were some of the things that from your childhood that shaped the trajectory for you?
Well, I always grew up in a very activism-oriented family. My uncle is actually Stokely Carmichael, who is the Black Panther who coined the phrase Black Power. My ability to, hopefully, potentially one day join my uncle and being an activist that actually came to real holistic solutions to problems that affect people that look like us, as well as having my voice be heard, is the day that my school unfortunately was shot up in 2018 on February 14th in Parkland, Florida. Even though it was a tragedy, it did allow me to have the platform to have my voice heard and to speak about things that don't necessarily only have to do with gun violence, but with systematic racism, the oppression of women, LGBTQ plus rights, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. And I didn't know you were kinfolk to Stokely, who's also from the great island of Trinidad and Tobago, which is where I'm from. So just gotta throw that plug in there. But for Thandiwe and Ashanti, I'm curious. You all, as you all mentioned, grew up with parents who were activists. I think Thandiwe, I think you were at your first protest before you even knew that you were at a protest, right? You were, I think I read somewhere you were like 2 years old or something like that. Can you tell me how that shapes the way, not only that you see the world, but the way you should move about in it, right? Because I think a lot of people see injustices, but I wonder if when you have a parent who is doing something about it, does that instill something in you where it's like, you can't just sit there and watch an injustice, you got to do something about it?
Yeah, so my mom is a single mother. And so to be an organizer and a single mother, there's not really a lot of options when it comes to, okay, let me find a babysitter so that I can go to this like last minute rally. Because we all know that a lot of organizing is intuitive organizing that comes after like huge tragic events. Yeah. So every time that there was a rally or protest, it was always like just instinct to, okay, let me take my kids, right? Part of Black radical tradition has always been youth involvement. It has always been the village raises the child type of situation, right? And so it's more than just I'm organizing because I care about, whatever the issue is. It's about I care about my people. And that looks like everybody coming together, making sure the kids are okay and making sure the kids are involved. It's about teaching, learning. And so, yeah, there was never a point in my life where I felt like I wasn't welcome in organizing spaces because I was like too young or, that like I wasn't meant to be there. It's just something that has always been passed down. Like my mom was raised as a union organizer by her father.
That's great. And what about you, Ashanti? Because, I think we spoke about this before, that I believe not only your mother, but your grandmother or your grandparents were also activists. But how did that shape you in terms of like seeing injustice and then doing something about it?
Yeah, I think my family definitely has a long history of activism. My mom's parents moved to California to join the Black Panther Party there. And my mom was also a single mom. So she definitely had that when we would go to protests or organizing events at Highlander. She brought me and my brother along because being a single mom, daycare, like you said. And I think it definitely showed me how to show up for my community, because whenever the call was there, whenever there were flyers or events on whatever social media was popular at the time, she was there and she was showing up and she was asking, how can I help? And that's really what I do now in spaces I'm in. I show up and I say, how can I help? How can I contribute? And that's something that's so important in organizing. It's like, how can we make this better? When we see injustices, when we see neglect, how can we use our platform or our resources to alleviate those troubles, to help the issue? And so I think being with my mom at such a young age, even sometimes when I didn't know what really was going on, I mean, it's still ingrained into me now as an older person.
And Brandon, I'm curious, like when you go through a traumatic experience like that, like, and you come out on the other end of it alive, like, how does that influence your perspective, I guess, in terms of going forward? I almost wonder if it's this thing where it's like, you got to make the most of every second and really put your energy into, like you said, maybe not just gun violence work, but other things that are important to you. Just tell me about how that kind of manifested with you, I guess.
Well, one, first and foremost, you want to be you're gonna be thankful for your life to be able to live and see your family again and your loved ones again. But it's, with me having lost a few people, you want to make sure that you do everything in your power to make sure that they didn't die for nothing or in vain. Their deaths um, that their deaths have as big of an impact on society and the world as possible. And I believe that that we've done that. We haven't done everything that we set out to do by any means, but in terms of getting people to listen, in terms of garnering as many eyes and ears as we possibly can, I feel like we've done that effectively.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious for all three of you, because the topic that we've been talking about is Black superheroes in some ways. Did you all view your parents or your family as superheroes, like when you were growing up? I'm just curious.
I definitely viewed my mom as a superhero. I was like, this woman is raising me and my brother, who were, we were really wild and very excited children, very loud children. And she's doing all that while at the same time showing up for her community and the kids in our neighborhood who, maybe didn't have resources to go to school, didn't have backpacks, trying to organize that. She was showing up and politically and advocating for policy and learning about laws and things like that. I mean, she definitely was a superwoman in my life, totally.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Brandon? Did you view any of your family, or who were your superheroes, I guess, growing up?
My mother is definitely a superhero in every sense of the word. Even though there weren't many superheroes that I could compare to, as there is a lack of Black women superheroes, unfortunately, but she is absolutely indestructible in my mind. She's just extremely emotionally strong, but she has the wisdom to know when to be vulnerable, if that makes sense.
And what about you, Thandiwe?
I don't know. I don't think I ever really viewed my mom as a superhero, just because, I still respect her and think that the work she does is amazing. But I think that one of the things that she made sure to teach me very early on is that this work is not special. We are not different. We are not, above anyone for doing this work. This is what we should be doing. And one of the things that she teaches me and my siblings is that no matter what you do in life, you have to do it on behalf of your people. You have to make sure that your work is meaningful. That doesn't mean you have to be an organizer. You can be a dancer. You can be a writer. You can be a poet. You can be, an astrophysicist, whatever you want to be. But just make sure that your work does something and means something. And that always really stuck with me. She wanted to make sure that uplifting the community is something that is normalized. And so I was taught to view people who were in the struggle as, I respected them and I really admired them, but I don't think I would ever put that type of work in the same type of superheroes.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to talk now to you all about kind of envisioning now what's possible. Let's dream a little bit. Let's think a little bit. Thandiwe, I know for you, the arts is an important outlet. And, it's funny. I was just recently, I'm in Minneapolis right now. And I was just recently at an art activist space that was recently built out here. And I was talking to the guy who runs that, and he talked about, artists are the ones who help keep social movements going. You know what I'm saying? The artists are the ones who help people see and who bring some clarity to the situation, either whether with words, with, performance, with paintings, things like that. I'm curious what you think is the role of art in envisioning the future and the justice that you want to see.
I think we need to talk about art and the role of art in this work, right? A lot of the times, we see the spotlight on the folks in the streets, whether that's good publicity or bad publicity or whatever, right? But I think just looking throughout history, art has had a huge role in all revolutions, right? We are the dreamers. We are the creatives. We kind of take whatever energy and emotions that are floating throughout the community and turn them into something tangible, I guess, and turn them into something that like gives us the drive and the energy to keep going, right? We're the like sustenance of the revolution. I find, especially in, you know, a lot of the times these spaces are filled with so much pain and trauma, right? It's constantly, it wears you down. It hurts you. And no one has talked about the effects of Black folks seeing our people die over and over and over again this past summer, right? What does that do to you? And so I think these art spaces really allow us as Black people to find a place of healing and find a place to release what has been building up for so long.
Ashanti, I want to talk to you about kind of like lawmaking and the legislate, you know, looking at things through a legislative process, because we see that's the way, the system that we have in place, essentially, that in one way or shape or form makes certain policy changes and affects change. And obviously your mother is a lawmaker in Kentucky. But in some ways, you know, from an activist lens, it might feel like these systems that we have in place might not be enough for radical thinking and radical change, I guess. I'm curious as what you think the role of lawmaking is. Can you do radical things and make, you know, sweeping changes through lawmaking? Like what kind of what kind of future can we envision through the systems and the lawmaking systems that we have in place?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot that can be done through the lawmaking process. And we're even imagining new ways. And as new situations and tragedies come out of things, we see the opportunity to make laws. For example, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. And just this last summer 2020, we had Breonna Taylor, who was killed, actually March of 2020. And out of that, we saw legislation that my mom has now proposed in the Kentucky State Legislature, which is Breonna's Law, which would ban no-knock warrants, which was how she was killed. The Louisville Metro Police Department issued a no-knock warrant and killed her in her home at night. So we saw that policy change that came out of the terrible tragedy of Breonna Taylor's death. But we saw the opportunity to have that policy change. And then also on the local level, I mean, legislators in themselves can be inspirational. And we just elected one of our youngest councilmen, Ja'Cory Arthur, who is an amazing councilman who's for like reparations policy. And he's issuing policy about housing in Louisville because we're in a very bad housing crisis with the pandemic. We've seen record numbers of evictions, like the 490 project that has come about in Louisville that's examining the police contract. And so hopefully we can have more accountability and hopefully we can reallocate funds from the police department back into the community so we can do preventative measures so we don't have to try to react to tragedies and try to make policies out of that. We can prevent it.
No, that's great. Very well said. And Ashanti, I'm curious. I want to follow up on that. Like, is part of the work to getting leaders into place who have that vision of doing things more than the status quo when it comes to lawmaking?
Absolutely. I think that new, young and old, just energized leaders that are passionate, leaders that come outside of the movement. I mean, I was looking at Congresswoman Cori Bush and how she was a Black Lives Matter activist in Ferguson, and now she's a congresswoman. And that's inspirational for folks. I mean, my mom is always on the front lines in the streets. She calls herself a reptivist. It's like we need activists, we need teachers, we need people who aren't like status quo establishment to really reinvigorate folks and encourage folks to get out there and run for office. And we also need that representation because people being able to visually see themselves in those positions that hold a lot of power and hold a lot of influence to change folks' lives. It definitely is inspirational, a change agent.
Yeah, definitely. And Brandon, so you have taken up, legislation. You've created legislation that you hope affects, serious change to some of these real systemic problems we're seeing. Can you talk a little bit about, the legislation that you are working on And in what ways does it have the potential to create that future that we really want to see, that's a more just and equitable future?
Of course, myself and Joshua Turner, an activist in Baltimore, came together to write the Breathe Bill. And the Breathe Bill is an action that will deconstruct the racism that pervades our police force. A few of our initiatives are to abolish qualified immunity, of course, relocate police funding to support schools, social workers, and community outreach programs, and to create more stringent qualifications to become a police officer. It shouldn't take only 22 weeks to graduate from a police academy, but it's going to take me 4 years to get a film degree. Is to completely change how we train and who trains our police officers. And that's going to be through outsourcing the training and allowing the community to pick what private entities are training the police. And it allows them to have more of a say and more control on how they're being served, how they are serving our communities, while mitigating the overall cost of training, of course.
Gotcha. No, thank you very much for that, Brandon. So we're running short on time here, so I want to leave each of you with one more question. And that question is, if you all could choose any superpower, what would it be, and how would you use it to change the world?
I don't know. I used to really like the ability to like change into whoever you want to be. That person from the X-Men, I think her name is like Mystique or something. I was like, yeah, I want to be her so bad. Her powers are so cool. And I think I would use that to get into places where I wouldn't normally be able to get into. I'm from Crenshaw District in Los Angeles. And so growing up, a lot of doors were always closed to me. And I had to kind of like change myself into someone who I wasn't in order to like get into places.
Oh, I've been waiting to get asked this question since like age of 5. I would choose the power to control time. I'd either want to slow down time so that people could really take the time to absorb what's going on around us, and to take the time to figure out real holistic solutions to the problems that plague our society. Black Lives Matter started in 2012 when Trayvon Martin died. It took 8 whole years until the hashtag resurged when George Floyd was murdered last year. The Columbine shooting was in 1999. My high school in Parkland was shot up in 2018. And now today in 2021, due to recent shootings in Boulder and Atlanta, the same conversation about gun violence is being reiterated because people just so happen to be paying attention again, for now.
For me personally, I would want to be able to teleport just because I feel like in this work, I just miss so many things. Like I want to show up everywhere. Like I want to be at every event. And I want to be able to highlight everything and put it on my social media. And I want to be able to uplift folks like the Black artists in my community and the kids like elementary school who make art and make videos. I want to be able to go to their showcases and then turn around and go to, you know, a march or a rally. And I feel like I want to be everywhere at once and I can't be. So I think if I had the power to teleport, like I would be able to be here and then, you know, I wouldn't have to worry about driving and all that. I can hop over here. I can hop to this state and, you know, I could just see everything, see the world and, you know, show up in every way, shape and form and everywhere.
Wow. Thank you for that. I want to thank all three of you, you know, just personally from me, you know, I don't want to get too sappy, but like I got my first child, a little girl coming in September, and if she can be half of what you all are in 2040, I will be really happy. So, you know, I appreciate you all, Brandon, Ashanti, Thandiwe. Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we still have some more event to go, so please stay with us.
Life is like a big merry-go-round. You're up and then down, going in circles, trying to get to where you are. Everybody's been counting you out. Thank you.